Welcome to the Reading for Wellbeing podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Pozzulo. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Jennifer Wallace, author of the bestseller, Mattering, The Secret to a Life of Deep Connection and Purpose. Jennifer is also the author of another bestseller, Never Enough, When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It. Welcome, Jennifer. Great to talk with you today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for reaching out.
Thank you. Before we start talking about Mattering, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in the topic of Mattering?
So I'm a journalist by trade. I worked for many years at 60 Minutes and also wrote for the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times. And in 2019, I wrote an article for the Washington Post about these were based on two national policy reports about who were the youth who were most at risk for negative health outcomes. And for the first time, students in, quote, high achieving schools were named as an at-risk group. These are public and private schools around the country. These students were under an excessive pressure to achieve, according to the researchers. And so this was leading to clinical levels of anxiety and depression and substance abuse disorder. Many more times, more likely were these students than the average American teen. And so I went to see who were the kids who were doing well, despite the pressures. And it really boiled down to mattering. This idea that the kids who were striving in healthy ways felt like they mattered for who they were deep inside, and importantly, were relied on to add value back to the world around them. Actually, it was, through tours, it was through meaningful engagement in high school and in the wider community. So what I found is that mattering is a kind of protective shield that buffers against so many of the stressors in our modern environment. This is, as I was writing that book, I was also looking at how this need to matter actually is a human need that is throughout the lifespan. So it's not just in adolescence, it's from our earliest days all the way through, taking our last breaths, that this is a fundamental human need that every single one of us has to feel valued and to have an opportunity to add value to the world around us. And I argue in this next book that fundamental need is going unmet in too many people. Yeah.
So I absolutely loved your book. I think it's critical. I think everybody should read it, from, parents to young people to older people. Amazing book. Maybe we could just start defining, how do you define mattering?
So I use a definition that Isaac Prolitensky, who's a US-based researcher, defines it as feeling valued and adding value. So feeling valued to ourselves, our friends, our families, our colleagues, our community, society, and having a chance to add value back across those domains. So mattering acts like a positive cycle. The more you feel valued, the more you want to add value. The more you add value, the more you feel valued. Researchers like Isaac and others, Gordon Flett, who's from Canada, describe it as a meta need or an umbrella term, meaning it's a need that sits above other needs and encompasses feelings of belonging and connection and mastery and meaning and purpose, all of these other needs that we have identified as the needs that we need to meet to thrive.
Yeah, so important. You touched on some of the impacts if we feel like we don't matter. You touched on some of the impacts that we can experience. Can you just go over, what happens? How do we feel when we feel like we don't matter?
Yes. So when we do feel like we matter, we thrive, we show up in positive ways. When we don't feel like we matter, we can withdraw. It could mean, stopping to accept invitations, isolating ourselves, become anxious, depressed. Some of us might try to numb out on, scrolling through social media or turn to substances to try to alleviate that real pain that it causes us. Others can, that lack of mattering can spill over into anger. school shootings, road rage, online attacks. These are, in my mind, desperate attempts for people to say, oh, I don't matter. I'll show you I matter. And honestly, I worry with the accelerating rate of AI, what that will do to further erode this sense of mattering that is eroding in so many people. Tech leaders like Bill Gates predict that within the next 10 years, humans may not be required for most tasks. What will that mean for us as humans when we are no longer needed in this way? This is something that is wired into us by evolution. We don't evolve that quickly. So what will happen when we don't feel valued at work or even to our neighbors? We're already seeing that erosion of mattering. When I was growing up in the 70s, mattering was baked in to our everyday lives. We knew our neighbors. We knew they relied on us. We relied on them. Being a good neighbor meant being invested in your neighbors. Not now today, being a good neighbor, particularly here in the US, means staying out of each other's way. At work, people are feeling disengaged. Something like 70% of the workforce is reporting that they are disengaged. That is not laziness. That is a big red flag that people feel like they don't matter at work. And what could you do if you don't feel like you matter? You don't have a voice. You disengage as a coping strategies, as a coping strategy. So I do see AI as potentially really accelerating this erosion.
Hmm. It's potentially could have, as you say, dire consequences, really. Can we talk a little bit about how can we matter? How can we increase our mattering, both for ourselves and for others?
I'm so happy you asked that because it's it's actually quite simple. Researchers have been studying mattering since the 80s, and they have found key ingredients that go into this feeling of mattering. In my mind, I've organized them into something I call the SAID framework, SAID, just so that it's easier to remember. We all want to feel significant. We all want to feel appreciated, invested in, and depended on. So SAID is said. So I could quickly just go through this. So when I ask people to talk about, tell me a moment when you felt like you mattered, it was never the big moments that they talked about. It was never receiving an award at work or getting a toast at a milestone birthday. It was the little moments. It was a neighbor coming by with a pot of soup when they felt sick, or a colleague checking in after a particularly rough day. I actually remember I was giving a keynote at a national conference, an educator conference, and this gentleman was receiving a national award by his colleagues, and they read off this list of accomplishments. But what brought him to tears, what brought tears to his eyes, was what his colleagues did after he received the award, which was to reach down and pull out a gigantic jar of M&Ms. That those M&Ms said something that the plaque couldn't. It said, "You are uniquely known. You hold a significant place in our minds." So that is what it means to feel significant. We crave to matter in the mundane, in the little moments of life. So feeling appreciated, I think about as appreciating the doer behind the deed. So it is helping our people understand that we appreciate who they are, not just what they do. So let's say you have a colleague who is great at planning team, nights out, team lunches. And instead of saying to a colleague, "Thanks for planning another fun outing for us," what you could say to feed their sense of mattering is saying, you are really a community builder here. Because of your efforts, you have made us such a cohesive team. I just want you to know how lucky we feel to have you in our lives. That's how we appreciate the doer behind the deed. Investment, researchers call this ego extension. The idea that we can invest in others and invite that investment so that our egos actually extend to include the successes and well-being of others. So it is not just, being a mentor, but really feeling invested in the people that we are mentoring, knowing their goals, checking in, and allowing that kind of investment into our lives. I say to my children all the time that at least, if not more than half of the joy I feel on any given day is because I am delighting and relishing in the successes of my friends and colleagues. That is such an easy source. It's almost selfish to be delighting in our friends' successes. So that's what it means to really be invested in someone is to be there to support them through setbacks, but also to just delight in their successes and to help them reach those goals. So the last one is being depended on, feeling relied on. We now have an app or some sort of service that we can tap into to ask people for favors. So we are now reluctant to ask people to help us. But what happens when we don't ask for help is that and what happens when we don't rely on others is that we give up this really critical source of mattering. So just asking for advice is one of the richest sources of self-esteem. So not reaching out to ChatGPT to ask for advice instead of a real human, we are denying people the chance of mattering, of feeling like they are worthy of being trusted and relied on. And we also want to feel that as well. So those are just the four main ingredients that we can tap into for ourselves and also to foster that sense of mattering in others.
What I love the most is it's achievable. It's not hard to get there. It's not hard to do. Everyone is capable of both, expressing gratitude and checking in with others, and there's reciprocity as well. And so I'm really glad that these are achievable steps that we can take. I want to talk a little bit about life transitions because you mentioned life transitions in your book. They can be particularly challenging. You lose your network, whether it's changing your job and your coworkers, or moving to a new city, and all of a sudden you don't have any friends anymore. Can you talk a little bit about how we can maybe matter when we are going through a transition?
Yes. So what is so compelling about transitions, what rattles us so much is that our sense of mattering can fall away. Like you mentioned, we know in a workplace who we matter to, where we're adding value to the team or the company's bottom line or the institution's goals. So when we retire or when we, even transitions like getting divorced or losing a loved one, our sense of mattering, who we matter to, falls away. And so the people that I interviewed, and I interviewed hundreds of people for this book, how they got through transitions successfully was when they realized that this was not that they weren't, coping, that they weren't. So often when we go through a transition, we feel like sometimes when we are struggling that we are just bad at coping with transitions. This is not true. Transitions by their very nature are can rattle even the most secure person. So knowing we are not alone in this struggle, that others have gone through it and come out the other side, is really the first step in thinking about how to get through this transition. It's looking for role models. It's looking for people who have successfully gone through it, inviting them to lunch, calling them up. If you don't have people in your life who've gone through a similar transition, it's reading a memoir of someone who's gone through something similar, listening to a podcast, reading an article, getting a kind of blueprint that has helped others that you can use in your own transition. Then harness the power of invitation. That means both accepting invitations and issuing them ourselves. Often when we're going through a transition, our lives can feel particularly messy, and we might be reluctant to want to go out and meet people and not show up as our best selves. But there's wonderful research called the beautiful mess effect, which tells us that we overestimate how much others require us to be perfect, to be loved, and underestimate how much that messiness, that vulnerability will really bring people closer to us. The the people want to be connected to authenticity. Showing a little bit of about our vulnerability connects people to us. So be open to invitations. Really push yourself to accept them. And if you're not getting the invitations, you have agency. You can start issuing invitations yourself. A woman I interviewed was going through a terrible divorce, and she was complaining to her therapist that her social life had really collapsed. So the therapist said, well, then you start inviting people into your kitchen for lunch or for coffee. It doesn't take much to build back our sense of mattering. What I like to tell people is that if you are really struggling and feeling like you don't matter, you are one decision, one invitation away from setting yourself back on that path to mattering again. It starts in small moments.
What would you like to leave our audience with? If there was, one or two main messages, what would you like to let our audience know?
So I would love to tell people that, yes, your sense of mattering is not fixed. It is going to fluctuate. And know this and prepare for it. If we know what is happening, we don't have to personalize these struggles. We can put them into a wider context. I also would love to issue an invitation, a challenge that I'm trying to live in my own life. I don't do this every day. I'm not perfect, but I do try to envision everyone I meet wearing an invisible sign that says, tell me, do I matter? And we can all answer that with kindness, with eye contact, with when someone is struggling or acting out or has an outburst, instead of meeting it with judgment, to meet it with compassion. And to just know that everyone on this earth right now is living through a time where our sense of mattering is taking a hit, and we can be mattering agents. We can, in these very small moments, reassure people that they are seen, that they are valued, that they add value. So just lean into those ingredients of mattering. Think about the SET framework in your everyday life.
Thank you so much. Such important, valuable information, and really a way to, change the way we look at others and even see ourselves. Thank you so much. The book is Mattering: The Secret to a Life of Deep Connection and Purpose by Jennifer Wallace. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for reaching out.